What is going on? Welcome to this very special live stream that is hosted by Uno.ai with me. As we always do for these live streams, we have the CEO and co-founder, Shashank Tiwari. Shashank, welcome to the live stream.
Good morning. Welcome. Yes, excited to be here one more time. I think we've been doing some of these and been having fun, discussing interesting topics, and of course, getting a lot of good customer and community engagement, right? Where we
Yep.
hear about real problems, real things out there in the wild, and see how that maps up to all the good stuff that we talk about. So, super thrilled about today.
Up to this point, it's mainly been you and I. We've had a few other people on these live streams, but we thought it would only be right to bring in a leader that could really bring some insight, some stories, and experience to how the GRC landscape is changing. And our very special guest for this live stream is Randy Potts, CISO at Real Time Resolutions Incorporated and co-founder of CISO XC, the number one conference for cybersecurity executives. Randy, welcome to the stream.
Hey, Ron. Thank you for having me. Shashank, great to see you again, sir.
Absolutely. Well, lovely to have you on this stream. And as I was saying a short while ago, it's been a lot about our conversation, and we get a lot of engagement from customers, community. Well, this time we have you live, so I'm sure the audience will get awesome opportunity to understand the practitioner's perspective as we go through the session today.
Yeah,
And just
thank
a heads up for anyone that's tuning in, this is a completely live session. If you have any questions for Shashank, Randy, myself, be sure to drop them into the chat and also drop into the chat. Where are you joining from? We would love to bring up the questions and any comments that you have throughout the stream. I figured a good place to start for this live stream and this conversation is by kind of pointing the attention to Randy to start and asking what is the current landscape of GRC, especially in the perspective from a CISO?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it's pretty involved at this point, right? I mean, there's a lot of mature question sets out of there. It's also kind of really broad and all over the place. I see too, So we are a business to business, So I get a lot of vendor management, a lot of questionnaires. I have an audit tomorrow. I had an audit last week. There's audits always going on. I'm always auditing other companies, and you definitely see where there's just controls all over the place. And so it definitely makes it a little complicated to kind of get to like a baseline. There's kind of like the basics across the board, but then there's also just, things that come out of left field, and everybody's kind of got their own interpretation as well.
So tell us a little bit about real-time resolutions, what you all do. Why are you doing so many audits? You just did one last week. You're doing another one this week. Tell us a little bit about the company and the role.
Yeah, yeah. So we are a debt collection company. And what that means is we're a financial services company to other financial services companies. And so we have, 100, clients out there that all have pretty mature GRC programs. And then we ourselves are required to have a mature GRC process. And that means, third party management, just as we're getting third party managed as well. And so that's where really it kind of, complicates my life. I'd say I probably spend 40% of my time doing audits. And honestly, I view that as like if I'm doing an audit and answering a question, I'm probably not advancing the security program. Now, it's great to go through those audits too, because you're constantly getting checked and you're constantly checking things. So, there's not a lot of skew in the program because we're always going through an audit. But at the same time, right, it doesn't really give a ton of time to kind of do advanced things that auditors really aren't probably asking about.
And that's where Shashank comes in. I'm so thrilled that I could introduce two of my friends together and, them to kind of like talk about security and how to advance things. It was during an event that we hosted called On the Big Screen, where I believe you and Shashank originally met. And I really thought what Shashank was building was special because as a cybersecurity engineer and architect, I can't read legal documents in the way that I feel as though I should to protect my business and also protect myself. Because let's be honest, the SEC and other regulatory standards are coming after the practitioners. Randy, what stood out about meeting Shashank to you, and what are some of those challenges that you want to alleviate or get rid of?
So you really hit it on the head. And yes, thank you, Ron, for doing an event like on the big stage, because it lets me meet someone who I probably wouldn't have met otherwise. Especially when, I mean, this is something I've been looking at. Like, how can I reduce this audit burden? But then, honestly, speaking to Shashank, it came down to he sees it as a much bigger picture. Like you were kind of hitting on, we've talked about doing legal reviews. I mean, I think everybody's had to do that where there's a new requirement. Hey, are we making sure all of our third parties are doing this? Hey, why don't we automate that and just kind of go through all of these contracts in minutes? Whereas like today, right? It's, hey, grab the intern, assign the legal intern, let them go through contracts for 2 or 3 weeks. Let's try to speed that up. And same thing on the questionnaire front. Hey, where can we automate this? Because these are not novel questions. These are things that we've done 1,000 times before, and so how can we speed up that initial pass, just to reduce that audit burden? So maybe instead of taking 40% of my time, it can only take 20%. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a huge win for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may chime in, I think the feeling is mutual. Firstly, by the way, thank you, Ron, for connecting us, and for many other interesting conversations like that you end up facilitating through your uh, real world as well as online meetings, forums, events that you organize. I think that the one piece that we were learning, right, like we are essentially a, call it a modern generation take at the old world of GRC, which has only become more onerous, more burdensome over a period of time. And our primary goal, very simply put, is try to automate away as much as possible, or hyper automate it away, so that the humans actually do where they add maximum amount of value, and they're not spending immense amounts of energy in doing tedious mundane activities, right? And so when we went on this path, we were speaking to a lot of leaders like Randy in the financial services world, leaders who run this for banks, leader who run this exactly like how Randy is doing, financial services that service and work with banks, right? Then insurance underwriters, you know, uh, companies that do loan origination, and all kinds of things, right? Like the financial services industry is a very complex industry in its own right, and similarly is healthcare, but financial services more so. And what I was noticing is that I think over the years, the amounts of just ask from the regulators, ask from the standard bodies, ask from the states has just increased and increased and increased, right? And it manifests in the form of like what Randy is saying, audits and ongoing audits, non-stop number of them. It increases in terms of clarifications both ways. Sometimes they ask you to provide, and sometimes they keep giving you note circulars, clarifications, which you then have to make sense of and try to figure out what to do with it, right? And then of course there is a bunch of other things in and around it, right? There's privacy regulations coming at you from one direction, and then there is contractual obligations staring at you from the other, and then you've got everything else in the middle, right, with real threat and real cybersecurity to take care of. So it's a very complex job. And so when I met Randy, I mean, coming back to the piece, I was very thrilled that Randy is someone who's nonstop sort of studying, and maybe that's part of the excellent work that Randy you've been doing as a part of the community engagement, like very much on top of it, because there are plenty of CISOs who definitely are unhappy about it, but they aren't necessarily rolling the sleeves up and saying, well, let me figure out what can I do to make my life more sane, right? And so I did feel that sentiment with Randy, that he was very keen and very curious, and he had done a bunch of other things as well, including some experiments with RP and other front stuff, right, beyond just GRC automation. So what I would like to ask you, Randy, here is that you've been studying the market, right? In a way, that's how I look at it. You're an excellent student of the market who's been very analytically and very thoughtfully been seeing how the landscape is changing, right? And the landscape is changing a ton, and it's changing as we speak, right? And so what are some of the salient things you kind of picked up through the years, and more recently, like where do you think the focus is, where it should be, what's going on, and maybe share some anecdotes. I've seen every CISO has some I don't know if I want to call it fun stories necessarily, but stories for sure, right? Stories from the trenches where, some things are interesting and some just popped up from the left field. So would love to hear some of your perspective there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So the space is interesting. Just because it is, I mean, this is something that's novel within just the AI space and the way we're applying it, especially the way we're applying it within GRC. I think GRC makes a ton of sense to put it there. It is interesting though, because like any sort of new thing, you're seeing a lot of different approaches to it with varying levels of maturity. I think that's one thing I kind of told you when I saw what you're doing at Uno AI. Is just you guys have built a really mature product. The way it shoots out answers is just the way you summarize and make succinct. I mean, they're very human sounding summaries and answers to these questions. I mean, it's really good. Because I've seen the other side where like we just append 4 million different documents and it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think I'm just going to confuse the auditor more than anything. And so I think like a lot of young, industries, that's what, I'm seeing is definitely just a lot of different approaches. I think one thing, that I think is important for everyone kind of looking at new technologies is just to, give everything a little bit of grace. I think especially with AI, there's been a lot of like, hey, AI is, not going to function, a lot of skeptics around it. But really that comes down to just being new technology. Anytime you have new technology, you're going to have these little bugs and quirks and you're going to work through those things. Like we just had this big CrowdStrike issue and, one thing that's interesting is when I think about like the early days of EDR, we broke a lot of stuff with EDRs. And I'm honestly really shocked CrowdStrike didn't have this issue when they were smaller. That was
Right.
my joke to my team. I mean, we were using a different EDR product and we had a similar sort of thing where it caused a major outage. But you know what? It was small. It really wasn't, it wasn't 90% of the marketplace. So nobody noticed, they fixed it, they moved on. And so I think that's one thing with new technology, right? Is there's going to be little bugs and things like that. And just do your checking, work with really good partners who make adjustments. Like, oh my God, the team at Uno, like, man, I said, hey, it would be really cool if you guys could do this. And like 2 days later, you're doing it, and so I think that's really good. It's just having good agile partners in the onset, I think is a big deal.
Well, very kind of you. No, thank you. And it's again, like I said, the feeling is mutual. We've been learning as much with engaging with leaders like you, Randy. So I think one part I want to highlight, though, which you mentioned, which is more broader, I think, for the industry at large, that there is a lot of expectation management as well at play, right? With the new tools, if you think this is going to solve all the problems you have and it's going to just do it, with a magic wand overnight, I think maybe we need to even temper that down, right? Like we need to start looking at what benefits can we get today and where can this technology go, right? And that's true about everything. Certainly a lot more truer about AI, which is the new thing in the block. But I think broadly you said it, like a large part of this is just understanding how could you take advantage of it today and where all can it go. And then the second part I think that you kind of brought up about CrowdStrike, and I'm going to segue a tiny bit there as well. I was also just being a practitioner in the space in my own way and having been through multiple different startups on the vendor side, but also having consumed these kinds of products when running organizations. I was a bit surprised and taken aback that such a problem wasn't unearthed sooner, right? But anyway, things happen, right? And so I think there are, in my mind, like two pieces that I took away, and I love how you summarized it, that everyone's got it. There's a problem like this lurking around in every product today, in a way, right? There's some hidden piece that is going to explode on you, right? It just so happened, unfortunately, because CrowdStrike is so widely used that it got blown out of proportion because obviously it impacted a lot of people's real lives. But there are a lot of small products, mid-sized products, that have these kinds of issues everywhere, right? And so that brings up, I think, like I was thinking about it, it also brings up more focus on problems around managing change, right? Because it also ends up bringing up this question of, as technology leaders, as folks like you, Randy, as CISOs, CIOs, and the folks on the other side who are responsible for day-to-day operations, how could one look at change management at large, right? Because this is one of those, you can maybe simplify it down to that. This was an update. This wasn't a hack. This wasn't an attack, right? It was a deliberate update that unfortunately went out of hand. So how can that be looked at? Can AI help there? What is the definition of change at all? Is an update a change? Is a configuration change a change? And then how do IT teams and security teams look at that? Should we be doing risk analysis for every single thing? And then that would again lead us down the path of trying to do too much, or do we have a mechanism to figure that out? So would love to get some of your inputs there. What do you think on that sort of broader issue there?
No, I agree. I mean, change management is one of those things where, when is a change a change? I mean, I think that's a huge thing. And honestly, I think about it in the terms of visibility. One of our favorite topics in the security space is I want visibility. I want more visibility. And then we end up with a SIM getting 20,000 events a second, and there's no way we can look at it all. And so, I view change management the same way, right? There's all these little things that are happening, and usually we put thresholds. We say, hey, if it's going to affect multiple departments or X number of people, then it needs to go through change management, that sort of thing. But the problem is especially like with the CrowdStrike thing, it's like you don't really know until you know. And so that's where, I think having like the sort of AI model, this sort of like automated way of just looking at things and modeling different scenarios and things like that, can kind of help you get to a point. Like I think about in the security space, we have this like breach and attack simulation space, right? Which I've kind of used several products in that space, gone back and forth. And that's what it's all about, is trying to find that weakness before a bad guy finds that weakness, And so this is where I think we're going to see a lot more automation, and artificial intelligence can really help, because you can do that modeling and kind of say, hey, across my environment, find all my weak points and then try to poke at them, and find an issue. And honestly, we can apply that across operations. It's interesting. We are heavily regulated. We have 150 different business licenses, and one thing we always say is like, hey, try to follow your complaints. So essentially you have all these users of your service, and if they're going to complain about something, then don't dismiss it. Try to dig into it, try to research it, try to get to the root cause of it. And I think we can do that on a broader scale and try to, essentially let AI be the ultimate user, and kind of doing all this different, call it QA type testing. I think that could unsurface a lot of issues, and not just on the technology side, maybe on the operational side too. We're like, I mean, we are a call center, people call into us all the time. And so it's like, where do we have a bad number? It's actually something that we're playing with right now on the operations side. Is there are tool suites that really you ingest all your kind of outbound outside numbers, and they test them and tweak them and play and let you know when you have a bad number, because there's not just the nuts and bolts under the covers, right? There's not just one number you call to reach real time. There's many different numbers. And so just that process of making sure that they're hygienic and they're working and they're functioning, there's a lot to that. So I mean, that's where we're at with the artificial intelligence space, is like, we've got these kind of like little narrow use cases, but really it's going to be this broad adoption, and it'll be really interesting to watch it mature and watch these platforms kind of develop out of it.
Truly, truly. Yeah, well said. Now there is another part that you've kind of brought up, Randy, and Ron, I would love for you also to chime in here on this, because you're seeing it from another perspective of just working with so many different cyber and GRC companies. Um, there is definitely, I think, the promise of AI. As Randy, as you're saying it, is it's beyond just small point solutions. Yes, there is a little surge and excitement around co-pilots and specific efficiencies, but if you expand that to a broader sort of the way we work, the way we operate, the way we communicate, right, the way we work with various stakeholders in a business, there is plenty of opportunity. Opportunity on the operational side, opportunity perhaps even when we start, right, like vendor risk management and contracting and all that stuff. Opportunity on an ongoing basis from a more technology and cyber risk standpoint, and then opportunity on multiple other fronts from a standpoint of just sort of operationalizing and making things more efficient, right? So there's none of that, I think, at all levels. So I totally sort of buy into your idea that I think the promise is much bigger. The promise is massive, and I think it's a matter of how we start and how we kind of build up to that promise. Absolutely. Ron, looks like we have some folks chiming in as well. So we have some audience saying hello to Randy too. So
Hello,
Yeah,
Chrome.
it's
You,
good
sir.
stuff.
Oh, that's excellent.
so one thing I think we should definitely jump in on is some of those inefficiencies and opportunities. Like you were just mentioning, Randy, that you had some ideas for Shashank and his product, and then he quickly turned them around. What are those inefficiencies that you're hoping to avoid? It sounds like it's definitely some of the burden that comes with GRC, the time burden. But what about those opportunities? You mentioned narrow use cases. Which ones is it important for a company like Uno and other GRC leader like vendors to focus on for you?
You know what's interesting, and anyone who's kind of like wanting to avoid doing the artificial intelligence thing, right? Is I just encourage you to jump in, because what it does is the very question you just asked, right? Or what is our inefficiency, right? And so that's what we've kind of noticed ever since kind of kicking off this sort of AI initiative within the company. So here's another thing I do as a security leader is try to lead that project, because that just
Mm,
gives me that little bit of extra control over what data is going there. So a big part of this, right? And we do this, with any sort of cloud-based SaaS type solution, is just what data is going into it. Trying to have some sort of management over that. But what's interesting is even asking that question to the business of, hey, what data do you think we're going to leverage in an AI tool, made them go, man, what data do we have? What data are we keeping? And it's interesting because you have a data governance program in place, and everybody's supposed to know what the data is. And we're supposed to know that we're getting rid of it. But, once they start really digging in and thinking about how they're using the data, it was a great exercise in just realizing, man, we actually have a bunch of data we still don't need. Even though we kind of said, hey, we want this, we want that. So, my first kind of inefficiency was just the inefficiency in the way we handle our own data. I think that's a huge part of this. And honestly, that's probably something, it's interesting within that DLP space, just data governance in general. Right there with identity management as being this sort of like perfectly imperfect process that I think we're going to keep finding more efficiencies within as time goes on. And it's interesting because that's where I go with the audit piece and just the inefficiencies within the audit space. You're going to get through an audit in, say, a couple of weeks, kind of start to finish.
yep.
And that's one of those things where you're really not going to dig that deep. And I think when I talk to my fellow CISOs, it's the big thing. We always talk about SOC audits. And hey, I really don't trust that SOC audit because I go through a SOC audit and I know they don't dig as deep as they should. So what do? We go and do our own questionnaire. That again, someone's going to take 2 weeks to do, and we're trying to get
Yep.
through as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And you really cannot dig as deep as you want to. And so, it goes back to the CrowdStrike thing, to just kind of across your operation. That's where you got to leverage technology. It's just that ability to dig in and see more than you would just trying to look manually yourself.
There's a group of people that believe that AI is going to replace their job. And then I've heard from other leaders out there that AI isn't going to take your job. It's someone using AI that's going to take your job. But what I think personally is jobs aren't going anywhere. AI is not taking them. People that are using AI aren't taking them, but the hard workers are going to be rewarded regardless, whether they have AI as an output or not. So I look at AI as an opportunity to help up level all of your team members. And that's like one of the creed and motto for Uno AI is to have every cybersecurity professional operate at the level of an expert. Today, my comfort with AI is as a co-pilot. And I think that's why I really identify with what Shashank was building because I don't necessarily feel comfortable with AI doing a process end to end, but I think it's essential that I use it to enrich or simplify information. And you're leading CISO XC, you, Jamin, and also CISO doing a great job building the community. I would imagine that you hear a lot of security leaders speak about AI and their comfort level. Where do you think the temperature is right now?
I think there's just a lot of distrust. I mean, we are a paranoid group anyway, and so that is definitely there. That being said, it's interesting when we do have these conversations. Everybody's doing a little bit of something,
Mhm.
so everybody knows it is the future. It's just a matter of the unknown of like how do we secure it, how do we control it, But really, the question is how do you leverage it to make yourself better? Because that's kind of the core technical question there, and that's what AI is going to help us. Haha, I like it. Somebody just said zero trust. I like it. Yes, yes, yes. That's our catchphrase, right? So I mean, I think that's it. It's just we are going to find the way, and it's the people who are trying and finding those ways who are going to become ultimately more efficient or more efficient, right? Because you're finding your inefficiencies and you're finding a way to kind of amplify your skill set. And so yes, Uno AI is a huge part of that. And just, if you think anyone who's used Chat GPT, to generate a script, right? There's always problems with it. And you've got to fix it. And so it's like, how do I know what to fix? But those are the things that over time are going to mature and we'll find the better use cases for it. And I think what you'll really find is like, so we use RPA tools. And so we use RPA tools to do kind of mundane tasks that normally somebody would have to do the same repetitive click, thousands of times. And now we have an RPA tool that just does it in seconds. And so we're going to find the same thing within the AI space where it's going to go, hey, I've got this problem. I'm trying to solve it. Let me ask the AI thing. The AI thing shoots some things at you, and you're going to take kind of the summary of the best options so you're not missing something. I think whenever you're solving a problem, you come up with a solution, you go, oh, cool, I found out how to do this. I'm good. But you really don't ever think, hey, was my solution the best solution? And so the extent that like AI can present you with, hey, these are all the possible solutions, and then kind of let the human do the work and the understanding of their organization to go, this is actually the one that's going to work the best for us, not just the one I figured out on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, it's a fantastic observation. In fact, I want to extend on a bit that you mentioned, and you gave the beautiful example of RPA. I think, Ron, as you were saying, I don't think AI is going for our jobs, but it's going to become a big enabler. And I think this is the classic sort of way to put your mental model around it. I feel that less people are willing to acknowledge the reality that in many of the operational workflows, and especially also in cyber and GRC, there are things that aren't necessarily exciting. They're mind numbing. They're tedious. You have to spend a lot of time doing it, right? For example, like GRC, I guess in some sense is the epitome of it sometimes, right? When there's like wrong regulatory notes or 500 questions to answer, or lots of audit evidence to just collect, or read through reams of contract. I doubt anybody out there like really cherishes saying, hey, today is my day to read 500 pages. Like that's not anybody's looking forward to on a given day, right? So and it sort of is analogous in a way to the RPA example that Randy, you just mentioned. So there is an opportunity to essentially in a way shift the role, I think, of human in the loop from doer to reviewer, right? So you're not wasting your time and cycles and all your energy and intelligence on things that could be automated away. And instead, what you're now doing is you're still using your energy, but now it's focused. Now it's very value adding because the machine, if you may, or AI has done a lot of that heavy lifting. It has done the reading for you. It has done the parsing for you. It has done the searching for you. It has done the reconciliation for you. Well, now you can make decisions on top of it. Now you can mine the intelligence on top of it, right? And it kind of, I think, is the similar school of thought, at least in my opinion, pervades across many workflows, whether it's data classification, data identification, contractual risk finding, audit preparation, responding to assessments. All of them have that same commonality, right? Where yes, you need the human in the loop. You definitely need a person to finally come in and pick the right sort of battles, if you may, and make the right decisions. but there is a ton of grunt work behind it, and that gets automated out. It's only happiness all around. Nobody's getting unhappy with that, right? And I think that's when maybe AI needs to look at. In other words, like, AI is really good for all the boring, mundane things first before it gets projected as the super intelligence that will replace us. I think we are far away from that, and I don't think we need to fear about that. We need to more look at, well, how is this an enabler, right? So, like, yeah, absolutely, I'm the same school of thought. I think there's plenty of opportunity there for us to essentially just use our time more effectively, right? Get more out of less, and get things moving in an efficient manner. So certainly there's something to it.
Let's talk a little bit about how we can secure the results. I had an experience a few months back where I hired a developer, and this developer was generating a lot of code using tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Google Gemini. And he submitted pull requests. I reviewed them, approved them, and then I had to switch out and bring on a new developer. And it took a little bit of time for me to get them up to speed because I didn't write the code. The previous developer didn't write the code. It was actually the AI. We were more so approving and making slight modifications. I would imagine it's going to be the same for optimizing GRC workflows. There's going to be one person or a few people that get very familiar with the questions, how to answer them, and they get the assistance from AI. But people naturally sometimes find new jobs, get promoted. How do you secure that win and do that handover to a new team member? I'm sure that both you all have two sides of this coin coming from vendor and practitioner. So I'll pass it to you first, Randy. We'd love to hear from you also, Shashank.
No, honestly, I think about that. That's one of the kind of most complicated things to try to achieve. It's just that kind of like easy, smooth transition, just across the board. Whenever you're bringing in someone new, I think a big part of that, right, is comes down to documentation. But it's
Hmm.
interesting because that's part of the inefficiency, because like in your case with the developer, right? Every minute you're documenting what you did, you're not doing, and so that can be tricky. And then the other question is, am I actually documenting everything? And so, honestly, I think this is a perfect place to kind of leverage something like an AI, right? To kind of give you that summary of what's going on in the environment. I think about it just in the terms of like when you do have a ton of documentation. Like I just went through this where I was doing a product upgrade, and there were many sort of like change summaries out there to be reviewed. And it took a lot of time just to review all of the change summaries for the updates to this product. And so that's the same thing. Whenever you're changing the person, right, they got to get up to speed. And we just had this with someone who kind of had to go on long-term disability, and we're trying to bring someone in to bring them up to speed. And it's going to take that person 2 or 3 weeks just to understand where the project was at. And so, yeah, how can we kind of speed that up to get a better summary of where things are at? Like, yeah, I mean, there is not a great answer today. Today, the answer is it's just an inefficiency, and it's going to set you back a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure that the two people, the new person and the older person, are having at least a little bit of time. But I look at it a little bit more complicated because, with this, it's like really three people because you have the AI co pilot. So, there has to be like a smooth handover process. And I think documentation is probably the best way that we have for now. I'm sure there'll be a AI product that comes out sometime that does AI handovers for projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So just adding my 2 cents to this, I agree with it. I think documentation, putting structure around it, sort of creating summaries, creating cheat sheets is the way to go, right? The question, of course, that I have seen also on both sides of the table, as a vendor, as a person who's run organizations and used these, same sort of pieces, um, is that I think the challenge is, can you do it in a sustained, disciplined manner over and over again, right? Like I feel like everybody's well intentioned and everybody wants to do it, and I think everybody starts with that sort of motto. But the problem is that it soon dissipates away, and it soon dissipates away because there is other work to be done, and this always becomes the second priority, unfortunately, right? Because there's more urgent, more important things to be done. um, Also, not everybody loves doing it. There is the room is usually split on this topic, right? Some people like to document properly, some others just don't like their process at all. Like, and especially with technical folks, right? Whether it's a security analyst, or whether it's a developer, many of them don't enjoy documentation as much. It's almost like a punishment for them, right? And so I feel like getting them to change behavior is a difficult one. So given this reality, I do feel there's an opportunity also for AI or any automation system that understands language to start capturing when things are being done, right? And we do a little bit of that, but I think there's a lot more scope there. Um, where let's assume that two members of the team are just having a meeting over an onboarding session. If that gets recorded, and we do have these now, an automated note taker sort of summarizes things and brings out the to-do list, the automatic to-do list, it becomes far simpler for the two of them then to kind of rally behind it. Similarly, we see that even in our own experience with GRC pieces. Uh, just one example to cite. There's a prospect, a customer that we started engaging with, and their team has massive privacy requirements, right? Because they work with a lot of PII data. And now, in its current shape form, the United States has actually become a very interesting place to do with privacy regulations. Why? Because we don't have a federal privacy law like GDPR, if you may, in Europe, right? And so, which means
Hmm.
depending on where your customers are, depending on who you're interacting with, you might be liable for nothing, or you might have to comply with 20 plus states, right? It all depends on your business. And it's a dynamic one, because you may not have a customer today in Connecticut, as an example, but you might add one tomorrow. And then suddenly now you're responsible to make sure that you're complying with the privacy law of the state of Connecticut, right? So what ends up happening is each one of them have their laws, each one of them the minor variations, right? Like, it's not like they have massive variations. They're all kind of deriving on the same foundation, but there are some nuances here and there. They all have that little tweak here, a little difference in reporting, little difference in identifying. Now, this team was getting really bogged down because they have to go and read each one of those from 25 states and try to summarize it. And it's not only about summarizing and reading, they have to make sure that all the members of the team who are doing privacy review are on board with it, right? So lots of documentation, lots of training, lots of knowledge sharing, all good stuff, but not the most fun thing and most easy thing to do. Well intentioned, they started doing that for a few of those, but I think then it started falling apart because it becomes very difficult to keep track of all these changes that are coming. I think in a situation like that, our auto summarizer, as an example, right, where you just put in a PDF document, put a Word document, reads it, summarizes for you, creates a cheat sheet for you, creates a checklist for you, automatically creates FAQs, that became like a savior for them. And the only reason it became the savior for them was exactly the same reason I was saying in terms of note taking, automatic note takers and conference calls. Same thing, right? Because now there was a third entity that was sort of summarizing, kind of listening by the side, if you may. In this case, of course, you upload the content, it does it. And it is creating that for you. It's taking the notes for you that otherwise you would have to take, and then kind of organize. So I think there'll be a lot of opportunities like that, I feel. And then last but not the least, I do want to talk about a tiny bit here, which I think I would love to again pass it back to Randy as well and see. We spoke about trust, right? Like, just how much can we trust AI, and all these inefficiencies. That is also, I feel, a big problem in this. And the reason for this is, if you look at public AI systems today, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any others that one is playing with, there is a lot of benefits, a lot of fun, but also makes up a ton of stuff, right? And there is a lot of hallucination problem, as it's being talked about. So that puts especially leaders like CISOs, who are, held responsible for all kinds of things they own and all kinds of things that they can't even control, right? Lately, half jokingly, but very true, I guess. And, Randy can confirm or deny this, but, there's just too much pressure on that role. They don't feel confident taking on the AI system for the same reason. Like, hey, what if I'm like misguided? What if this was some made up stuff that just sent me down a path that now I have to dig myself out of, because this has created new liabilities, new headache for me. So I feel like what the approach we took of making sure everything that the system says has citations, everything that the system says can be traced back to the origin of what content was used, something that you can reconcile back with your own data set. I think that, to my mind, for enterprise AI is going to become a fundamental part, until of course AI at large becomes very reliable. And I don't know when that would happen, and even if it would happen. But I think until then, you need that way of reconciliation, traceability, ability to go back. And I think that also goes back to the original question of handover and the three-party feel. How much can you rely on this AI system that is going to now generate the cheat sheet for you? You have to feel confident, right?
Mhm.
Because it won't be fun if the cheat sheet is developed and then you feel like, I'm not sure if I can rely on it. I have to still go back and do the work. So I think there is a little bit of a opportunity and, I would say, challenge both simultaneously here. So what do you folks think? Let me kind of pause there and give it back to both of you, on both these counts.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of wholeheartedly agree with you. That's one of my biggest pet peeves of the security tool when it kind of pops a security alert and you can't kind of get to the root of what caused that alert. So same thing what we're talking about here. If I have a summary, and again, it's something you guys do really well, which is giving a really nice human readable summary, but then having all the references to it in case you do want to fact check, in case you're reading that script that Chat GPT created for you and you go, that doesn't make any damn sense. You could kind of like click in and drill and then go, oh yeah, it completely misinterpreted this. Like, especially as we're like early on, and you're right. I mean, at some point it'll be like spell check in my Word document where I just trust it and I go, okay, I guess that's the way it's spelled. We are far from that right now. So I do think that ability to kind of trace back your AI and really understand, kind of what that inherent bias is based on, and kind of how it got to that conclusion, I think is really important right now.
Shashank, on a previous live stream, we spoke about the difference between AGI, artificial general intelligence, and ASI, specialized intelligence. And ASI reminds me of expert systems. Expert systems are amazing because they're designed by people that we deem to be experts, and then you get to see what the analysis was. A lot of times, tools in the past would give you a score, and you'd be able to click on the score, see a little drop down, and see this score is a 9 out of 10 because MFA is not enabled. It's 9 out of 10 because this user doesn't have a strong password. And you get to start to see some of these artifacts. And one of the things that I really like about LLMs is you can go back to them and ask why. Up until this point, the AI would give you some insights, and that's what it was. It's based off of the neurons and the weights. But an LLM gives the model some ability to provide insights as to why it got there. It might lie to you, like you're mentioning, but I think that we're one step closer to allowing the AI model to help us understand what it understands. And one of the things I like about using you all's tool, the experience that I've had with it is you get multiple different perspectives. You get the perspectives of, hey, it's this section. This is the summary of this specific section. It's all highlighted. There's a summary. You get a summary of the whole document. You can get summaries of multiple other pieces as well. I think humans work best in bite-sized chunks. So I think anyone that develops AI systems should really think about spoon feeding some of the output rather than just giving like one specific answer.
Yeah, totally. I think that you've kind of said it. At the end of the day, specialized systems that do specific tasks really well are the ones that we need and the ones that will shine. And of course, they can also give it in a way that humans can consume it and make use of it without necessarily going through like a 10-day class before they can get ready to use it. I think is the one that's going to shine for sure. um, in fact, I think there is another part to it, and this is something that we very intentionally went down the path. You need domain specificity, because at the end of the day, even the same kind of text, and when I say the same kind of text, I mean quite literally the same kind of text. For example, there's just, let's say, a GLBA regulation, right, or a SOX regulation. It would be read with different perspective depending on what role you're in. An auditor is going to read from a GRC standpoint in a certain way, a lawyer is going to read it in a slightly different way, and an operational person who's going to go put the controls there is going to again read it in a slightly different way. Why? Because they're all taking the nuggets in slightly different forms, right? The GRC auditor is looking at what are the important bits, what do we need to comply with. The lawyer is probably wearing the lens of liability and what is absolutely must versus nice to have, because that's how they think in terms of possible damages, possible cost. And the control implementer is looking in terms of what do I need to do with my system, what does it translate, right? So the reason I bring that up is I think there is a lot of nuance to this, right? And so bringing that nuance is only possible once you get more and more domain specific. The more you bring domain data, the more you train on the domain, any domain whatsoever. I think that's when you start seeing the real value, right? Otherwise, you see things which are so generic that they're great, but you can't really work off them beyond a certain point. So I think there is an element of domain specificity as well. And then the associated part there, which I think that is also important, and something I think I've heard a lot from practitioners, and I would love to hear this from Randy as well, is that if you look at these tasks, while the system is very smart and the system can do a lot of the things, it's only as good as it is perceived by the user. It is only as good as the user experiences, right? There are systems that can do incredibly great things today, forget even AI systems, but if you have to spend a lot of time, energy, money training yourself, changing your habits, learning a scripting language, and the works, somehow you don't end up seeing value out of those products because the friction to using that is too high, right? And so I feel like AI tools also in a way enable that, but it's necessary for them to be good in terms of user experience, so that there isn't like massive amounts of effort going up front. And I don't know,
Mhm.
Randy, if you have any thoughts. I mean, you're a practitioner, you look at a ton of tools, what's your thought on like user experience sort of part to play in any smart intelligent tool?
No, I mean that's a huge part of it. I think in security, that's something I always think about is just the perception versus reality. You don't want to think you're secure and you're really not, and you
Hmm.
don't want to think you're not secure and really you have tons of security control. Trying to make sure your perception matches reality is a huge part of that. And honestly, when it comes to the user experience part of that, right? I think that's a big part, right? Is you don't want people navigating around your security controls because you're causing them a lot of problems. So a big part of that perception and reality is, hey, is this as low impact as I think it is? Am I causing too much security overhead? To the extent that people are going to start trying to avoid my security control. And so within the AI spectrum, right, it's the exact same principle, right? Is hey, I've got this AI tool. Is it really that useful? Is it worth maybe some of the risk and the overhead that it introduces, versus the benefit that we're getting. And so it's really interesting. So if I like we were talking about the whole references and having to double check it, right? Like it's nice to have that ability, but you do need to develop trust in the tool as well.
Right.
And that comes with, and that's where I think these little point exercises are good to start off with, just because it helps you build confidence in the technology. Because you see it be successful and then you kind of build up. Like we've talked a ton about that, Shashank, of just trying to get broader adoption within the organization. And it comes from just really, we're a pretty conservative organization and we're skeptical of new things. And that uptake by the users, I think, is going to take some patience as well. But I mean, at the heart of it, you have to be shooting out good answers so they don't have to second guess it all the time.
That's true. That's true. No, I think you're also, in other words, saying that trust is kind of earned, and the trust should be earned by the tool, right? Over a period of time, it just delivers to promise, and the more it delivers to promise, the more the users get comfortable, and then eventually it becomes second nature. You stop worrying about it, right? And that's what happened with, I think, if I don't want to get too philosophical, but that's the reality how we adopt every technology, right? Like we get worried about certain machinery or certain sort of things in our lives initially because we're not sure what it's doing or how it's working, but after a while we can't live without it, right? Whether it's home equipment or some automation stuff, and same thing applies to software, right? So I think it's a matter of just building that trust, using it enough, and the tool or the platform delivering enough value over a period of time, and kind of earning the trust. So yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you there.
So, as we kind of approach the end of this live stream, I think it would only be right to re-highlight Uno AI. Randy, if you're open to it, we'd love to hear. What were your initial thoughts after looking at Uno AI, and what should other CISOs keep in mind if they were to embark on getting a demo or joining their wait list? And Shashank, want to wrap up with you, giving that direct call to the audience for how they could take all of this information and move forward with it right after Randy responds. So let's jump off with you, Randy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the number one thing that jumped out to me was how much the team at Uno kind of cares about security and first, but also has a really good understanding of where AI is at and where it's useful. I think that's one thing is we're very much in a hype cycle with AI. There's a bunch of people promising the world who just aren't really grounded in reality. And that is not Uno. Uno, I mean, they are experts in the subject. They know where it's good, where it's bad, and they kind of know how to put those guardrails in place for you. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I highly recommend anyone kind of check them out. And yeah, we'll work with Shashank and his team because, man, they really know what they're doing. It's impressive.
Well, thank you so much. I think I want to first start by thanking you on two counts, Randy. I think it's the feeling is mutual. Good products and startups also need awesome leaders on the other side to work with. And I think we've absolutely learned a ton from leaders like you, and it's been absolute pleasure, right? And I think like that's my invitation to other leaders as well. If you are on that journey exploring and want to see something, get your hands on it and see for yourself. Like, don't believe us necessarily, but see for yourself, experience, find out the use cases where we could be helpful. I think we are here for you, right? And we like that as well. We like to commit to our customers, bring it to them, and work with them closely. So absolutely, I think that's basically the piece that I would uh, you know uh, totally sort of recommend we do. So thank you again. I truly appreciate that. All the good work that has sort of happened, all the great conversations. I think it'll give us an opportunity to deliver that for you and work with you. And we are here, right? And if you want to find us, the best thing to do is go to our LinkedIn site. You can find us there. You can also find us on uno.ai, our website. And then, of course, if you would like to speak to some of our users or engineers to understand more on different perspectives, we like to enable that even before you want to take a taste of the tool on the platform. So thanks again. I want to kind of, close at least my bit here. Thanks again, Ron, for organizing this wonderful session. You're an awesome host. And I truly appreciate Randy for coming on board. The community, the users will learn a lot from your just perspective. And thanks for the shout out and the kind words for Uno. It's really appreciated. And, we are here and we want to work with leaders like you. So thank you.
Thank you. For anyone that hasn't done so already, be sure to follow the Uno AI LinkedIn page, like Shashank just mentioned. Go to Uno AI and join the waitlist. Also, connect with Randy Potts. You got to check out CISO XC if you haven't already done so. And Shashank, always a pleasure. The audience, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day to jump on the live stream with us. And with that, we will see everyone next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.